Thank you, Gordon. We are pleased to confer the honorary Doctor of Laws degree today. Dr. Stephen Long, will you please present the honorary degree recipient, Mr. Jock Finlayson.
Jock Finlayson has been a leading voice on economic and public policy issues in British Columbia for the past 2 decades. From productivity and innovation to skills education and human capital, he understands the big picture. As Executive Vice President and Chief Policy Officer at the Business Council of British Columbia, he represents the interests of 260 large and mid-sized companies and affiliated industry associations. A distinguished business economist and master communicator, Jock works at the interface of academic research and public policy. He takes the fruits of academic research and applies that knowledge to the public arena. Small and medium businesses, government, and the general public benefit greatly from his expertise and communication skills. He comments frequently on economic, business, and public policy issues, and has published more than 300 op-ed pieces for newspapers, including the Vancouver Sun, Troy Media, and the National Post. Born and raised in Comox, BC, he is a passionate and tireless advocate for the province's future. Jock's work with the Business Council includes economic, fiscal, tax, environmental, regulatory, and human capital issues. He manages the Business Council's policy and research staff and oversees its publications, including the highly respected and anticipated BC Economic Review and Outlook Report, which analyzes and forecasts the province's economic performance. Jock represents the Business Council before legislative committees and government regulatory bodies and works closely with senior business executives across the province. Prior to assuming his current role, he was Vice President and Chief Economist at the Business Council until 2001. His exemplary work and influence extends Canada-wide. Currently, he is a member of the National Statistics Council and sits on the board of the Institute for Research on Public Policy and the board of Genome BC. He is also a fellow of Royal Roads University. Prior to joining the Business Council, Jock was Vice President of Research of the Canadian Council of Chief Executives. He has also served as a member of the board of the directors of the Bank of Canada for 6 years until 2013, and during that time, chaired the board's Corporate Governance Committee and the Fellowship Nominations Committee. He has also served on the board of the BC Innovation Council and for several years was a member of the provincial government's Degree Quality Assessment Board. He is the past president of the Association of Professional Economists of BC and of the Ottawa Economics Association. Jock holds a master's degree in business from Yale University, undergraduate and master's degrees from UBC, and a postgraduate diploma in economics from the University of London. For his distinguished service as an economist and passionate advocate for British Columbia's future, Royal Roads University is proud to present Jock Finlayson for the honorary degree Doctor of Laws.
Now, I just have to find my place. Where's it? Thank you. Mr. Jock Finlayson, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Royal Roads University Act, and in accordance with the recommendation of the Board of Governors of Royal Roads University, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa, with all the rights, privileges, and honors here and elsewhere thereto appertaining. Mr. Jock Finlayson will now be hooded by Dr. Alan Cahoon, President, and Vice Chancellor. President Alan Cahoon will now present Dr. Jock Finlayson with his degree. It is with pleasure that I now call on Dr. Jock Finlayson to deliver the Convocation Address. Congratulations and thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Chancellor Strandland, President Cahoon, directors, governors, faculty, and most of all, graduating students and their families and friends. It really is an honor for me to be here today and share this special moment in your journey to obtain a post-secondary education. When I look back at some of the people who'd received an honorary degree from Royal Roads prior to today, I have to confess my surprise at being selected. It's humbling indeed to realize that previous honorees include former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge, distinguished BC public servant Ted Hughes, former Premier of this province Mike Harcourt, and Canadian business leader Elise Allen. There can be no doubt that this is the finest club I've ever been asked to join, and I'm certainly very grateful for the opportunity. Let me begin by officially offering my congratulations to today's graduates. You've all completed successfully master's, undergraduate, and certificate programs in a range of disciplines, including several fields of management, leadership, human resources, and tourism. I can still recall, albeit vaguely these days, the sense of accomplishment upon finishing my own post-secondary studies many years ago. It is truly a wonderful feeling and an important rite of passage in anyone's life, and I hope you'll look back on it fondly. Although I have not personally had a chance to study at Royal Roads, I do know something about the university. It has an interesting and indeed storied history as one of Canada's leading military colleges, evolving to the current position within the top tier of Canada's most innovative and unique post-secondary institutions. I'd like to acknowledge two particular features of Royal Roads which I think warrant emphasis here. One is the university's orientation toward applied research, including, importantly, interdisciplinary work. This is a differentiator for Royal Roads in the Canadian university marketplace. The reality today is that the contemporary academic research enterprise embodies powerful incentives that favor narrow subject matter specialization. While that model has helped to advance human knowledge and understanding, it often works against the goal of sharing knowledge across disciplines, and even more so with the wider non-university community. It also tends to reward the intensive investigation of small-scale problems and minor intellectual puzzles. The truth is that our world also needs smart people in the universities to devote their time and energy to the big problems we face and to the issues that matters to our citizens, policymakers, and private sector decision makers. Society also benefits from academic inquiry that is directed at finding solutions to practical, real-world concerns. To my mind, all of this creates a very compelling case for applied and interdisciplinary research of the type Royal Roads is actually known for. A second defining characteristic of Royal Roads, familiar to all of you, I'm sure, is the commitment to accessible and blended learning models, with a particular focus on people already in the workforce. This is hugely important in a world and a country where the population inexorably is getting grayer, and where many more people during the course of their working careers will need and want to upgrade skills and credentials in order to have rewarding lives and successful careers. American business icon Warren Buffett once observed as follows: "Someone is sitting in the shade today because someone else planted a tree a long time ago." I like this quote from Mr. Buffett because it indicates that one of the world's greatest investors is convinced that history matters. At a time of rapid-fire technological change and seemingly diminishing attention spans, it's easy to lose sight of the true foundations of our social and economic well-being. Canada's prosperity today reflects not just the efforts of today's entrepreneurs, workers, managers, and policymakers, but importantly, the wise investments made in the past to create and grow great companies, to build essential physical infrastructure, to expand education and improve skills, and to create the social supports that speak to the values of a decent society. What some social scientists refer to as path dependence, or simply the importance of the historical record, is not only relevant to us at the society level, it also affects us all as individuals. I'm struck at my stage of life that serendipity, or what might simply be called good fortune, plays a surprisingly large role in human affairs. Our own life paths and personal achievements depend in many and important ways on the actions of other people, and also, of course, on random events. This undoubtedly has been true in my own case. To begin with, born in 1955, I came to life in the exact middle point of the baby boom generation, which stretches from 1946 to 1964. This is a group, including myself, who've experienced neither war nor deprivation, unlike my ancestors and so many other people who live in the world today. I benefited as well from being part of a middle-class family that encouraged and valued education. At university, I was fortunate to find excellent professors, some of whom became intellectual mentors and nurtured my lifetime interest in academic scholarship and continued learning. Early in my professional life, in my early 30s in fact, I gained insight into what makes Canada tick thanks to regular and intensive exposure to senior-level decision makers in government and business while working in Ottawa. For almost 30 years, I've had the immense advantage of working with other smart and committed people who shared my interests, had ethical standards, and in some cases have become close personal friends. A few years ago, I was very privileged to be asked to serve on the board of directors of the Bank of Canada, Canada's central bank. This experience, particularly for someone with an interest in the economy like myself, equipped me with a deeper and more practical understanding not only of monetary policy and interest rates, but how the Canadian economy operates and how it fits into the wider world. It also afforded me a ringside seat to the global financial crisis and recession that took the world by storm in 2008 and 9, and to the disappointing economic recovery that has followed in its wake. Above all, I'm grateful and fortunate to have had a life partner, my wife Marlene, who combines an incisive intellect with a kind and generous heart, and that truly has been the greatest privilege. One thing I have learned from all these experiences, and from many of the people that I've had the privilege to know in my career, is the value of an open mind and a balanced perspective. While, like many of you, I have strong opinions on matters in the domains of the economy, business, and public policy, I also recognize how little I really know, and I embrace the reality that many other people possess insights that elude me. Increasingly, for me, the words of philosopher Bertrand Russell ring true. The whole problem with the world, he said, is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, while wiser people are the ones full of doubts. Looking back at my career from the vantage point of somebody who spent 3 decades either in university, and there was a lot of years in university, and then worked as an analyst and advisor and research manager within the Canadian business community, I can only reflect on a few of the trends that have really reshaped the business and economic environment over the course of my working life. Consider, for example, that quite a few of the largest corporations that drove the Canadian economy in the early 1980s have either disappeared completely or been absorbed into other enterprises. Examples include Nortel, Noranda, Inco, the retailer Eaton's, and in British Columbia, the venerable Macmillan Bloedel Forest Company, all gone. Whole new industries have arisen in our economy, often based on technological innovation, while others have dwindled or disappeared. Far fewer people in Canada and other developed countries today are now directly employed in manufacturing, even as sectors like healthcare, education, finance, professional, scientific, and technical services have been adding jobs at a furious pace. Employment security and job stability have declined for many working people in Canada and other countries. Our own population and workforce have become more diverse, mainly due to one of the world's highest rates of immigration. And indeed, in British Columbia today, fully 1/4 of our labor force consists of people who were born outside of Canada. There are 2 other specific trends that I'd like to share a couple of thoughts on with you this afternoon. The first is the expanding role of women in our economy and workforce, something I have witnessed up close. I would argue that this is actually the single most consequential socioeconomic phenomenon of the past 50 years. As more women have entered our formal labor market, completed education, and in some cases followed the path of entrepreneurship, the productive capacity of Canada's economy has been augmented, and average household incomes have risen. Indeed, a surprisingly large share of the total growth in Canada's economy and the overall increase in market income in this country since 1970 is actually attributable to rising female labor force participation. Today in Canada, women make up almost half of the country's workforce, compared to 37% in the mid-1970s. And last year, 6 out of 10 women in Canada were employed, compared to only 42% back in the early 1980s. Now, it is true that despite gains in educational attainment, many working women in Canada are still clustered in relatively low-paid occupations. This serves to dampen average compensation for all female job holders collectively, and it also helps to explain the persistent male-female gap in average hourly pay. But as we look to the future, the impressive advances that women continue to make on the education front will surely be felt in the labor market going forward. By all measures, indeed, women are outperforming men in raising what economists call their level of human capital. It's well known that girls are outperforming boys in school, for example. And for almost 20 years, women have made up a majority of all university and college enrollments in Canada. They comprise a growing fraction of both current post-secondary students and recent graduates in a range of university degree programs that often pave the way for high-paying jobs, including management, finance, accounting, law, and the health professions. Women are also making inroads, albeit more slowly, in fields like engineering and computer-related disciplines. Now, there's more to be done in Canada, particularly in our private sector, to establish an environment that will truly enable women to reach their full potential in the workplace context. But I think we should acknowledge the progress that has been made over the previous 30 years and celebrate the fact that women in Canada can now aspire to and attain positions of top leadership in our enterprises, our public institutions, professions, and legislatures. A second important trend that has profound implications for Canada over my working career has been the much discussed concept of globalization in all its various dimensions: the explosion in cross-border trade in goods and services, rising international capital flows, the global fragmentation of production processes, and the movement of ideas and knowledge across national borders. Since the late 1950s, international trade has grown significantly faster than total production, meaning that most countries, including Canada, have become more exposed to international markets and more sensitive to external competitive forces. These countries, including Canada again, have also seen a noticeable rise in the ratio of trade relative to their overall gross domestic product or economic output. International capital flows, foreign direct investment, cross-border lending, and other forms of international portfolio investment have also increased steadily over recent decades. The education sector has also been affected and indeed has gone global, with more and more foreign students studying in education institutions in countries like Canada, the US, and Britain, and universities like Laurel Roads establishing partnerships with other universities in Asia-Pacific markets. Now, interestingly, the globalization of trade and financial market activity that's been going on for the better part of half a century has decelerated noticeably since the crisis of 2008. And this is leading some analysts to wonder whether the 6-decade period of progressively greater globalization may actually be coming to an end. One sign that the competitive and economic landscape does seem to be shifting is the reshoring or repatriation of certain kinds of manufacturing back to North America, which hints at a possible reversal of the previous pattern of relentless outsourcing of production to China and other low-cost Asian markets. There's also some evidence of reduced cross-border banking activity since 2008-9, as some large banks retrench and refocus on their domestic markets. Now, frankly, it's too early to say whether the long post-World War II process of global economic integration has actually run its course or whether it's simply taking a pause. But the issue will certainly bear watching by policymakers as well as business decision makers in the years to come. Now, as today's graduates continue with or launch your careers, I guess one question that perhaps is on your minds is, what are the economic and business forces that will influence your own career choices and prospects? This takes us into the realm of speculation rather than hard data, but let me close by sharing a couple of thoughts on the future that I suspect you may well encounter. One thing we can say with a lot of confidence is that population aging will continue to affect our economy and our job market, not only in Canada, but all of the developed countries, as well as nations like South Korea and China. with the oldest baby boomers having reached the ripe old age of 65 in 2011. A generational retirement wave is now firmly upon us, and it is about to gather force. Now, I know that there are some people who work past age 65. University professors are actually one of the most likely to do that. But in the broader economy, I can assure you retirement generally occurs between the age of 59 and 63. So there will be a lot of people exiting at least traditional full-time employment in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, even in a world where potential economic growth is likely to be slower than in the past, the reality is that many organizations in the public sector and the private sector will be stepping up hiring to replace the burgeoning ranks of retiring employees. In addition to the loss of particular skills and of people in leadership level positions, thousands of companies and public sector employers in Canada are going to be grappling with the erosion of institutional memory and the loss of tacit knowledge that's associated with the exodus of long-serving staff. Business leaders do understand this risk. Talent acquisition, retention, and human resource development are now top-of-mind concerns for most of the executives that I have the chance to work with. It's true, of course, that since about 2008, the job market has been pretty challenging, particularly for young adults and recent post-secondary graduates in Canada. But I believe the situation is going to shift quite soon to the advantage of those who are seeking new jobs or promotions, as several 100,000 baby boomers leave the Canadian workforce in the next 5 years. Some of you may well be tempted to bid them good riddance. A second prediction, and then I will close, concerns the issue of inequality and how we can ensure in a market-based economy like Canada that the fruits of progress and economic growth are broadly shared. The debate over inequality and the related issue of socioeconomic mobility is truly with us today, and I don't think it's about to fade away. In fact, I think it's going to intensify. Since the early 1980s, many relatively affluent countries have experienced greater concentrations of incomes and of wealth in the top 10%, 5%, and particularly the top 1% of all households. This basic trend is most starkly evident in the United States and Britain, but the forces propelling inequality, including technological change and the rising economic premium that accrues to certain kinds of post-secondary education and to entrepreneurial talent, these forces are also present in Canada and many other advanced economies. And indeed, I was struck last week reading a recent issue of The Economist magazine that reported that real median wages have stagnated for half of all industrial economies in the period 2000 to 2014, which is quite a striking statistic. Canada is actually not one of them. We've done better. But again, we are being affected by the forces that are bearing down on a lot of the other global market economies. Going forward, I think there is a risk that economic growth and increases in economy-wide productivity are going to deliver few gains in real incomes for a large and perhaps growing fraction of the working-age population. Over time, a society that fails to share the fruits of economic growth on a broad basis is likely to underperform on growth itself, and in addition, is likely to be more prone to financial and policy instability. I believe this is a scenario that should trouble business decision makers as well as government policymakers. The good news, however, is that Canada has done quite well. We have been able to forge a society where a fairly high degree of economic mobility exists across generations. This means that someone in Canada born into a lower income family has a decent chance to acquire an education and achieve a higher economic status as an adult. This is something I think we should seek to hold on to retain in the face of economic and technological forces that may continue to push us in a different direction. To conclude, Royal Roads, in my view, has succeeded in making a post-secondary education both more accessible and more relevant to you and others who've chosen to pursue their studies here. Today's graduates have worked hard to complete your degrees and certificate programs. There are some, and we read about this in the newspapers periodically, who appear to doubt the value of a post-secondary education, including a university education. I actually am not among them. The overwhelming evidence shows quite clearly that people with university and college qualifications do better than those who lack such qualifications across a range of economic and social indicators, including incomes, employment rates, health status, and incidence of poverty. University education changed and enriched my life, and I very strongly suspect the same is going to be true for those graduating here today. It's truly been a privilege for me to spend a bit of time with you this afternoon to share my own reflections as you graduate from Royal Roads, and to accept with gratitude and appreciation the honorary Doctor of Laws that the university is conferring on me. Thank you for your attention.